Brian, let's talk about what project management can be applied to. I think it's important for folks to understand when you're going from client has just executed the agreement, Netrio's taken on outsource managed IT, to you're deploying an SD-WAN solution, to deploying contact center service. Walk us through what you apply project management to and to what magnitude you apply it to.
So when you're talking about something like a managed IT services agreement, we've got a 35-step project management plan that walks you through from start to finish. But then when you think about, maybe a smaller implementation of SD-WAN, maybe a firewall installation, something like that, that's going to be a much shorter project plan. You kind of establish the same components to it. There just aren't as many involved steps. In our case, we use templates that we can apply to most every project. Now, that's not to say that doesn't get modified slightly based on the client's engagement criteria and the requirements that are built into it. All right, so the first tenet of good project management is project initiation. There's several steps involved underneath project initiation. We want to establish what our overall goals are, goals and objectives. We've got a document, we've got to understand everything that we're trying to achieve.
And is that client-driven or is that Netrio's goals and objectives?
It's going to be both. So it's a combination or a hybrid. So the next piece of it we're going to want to establish is the scope of the project. What all is included in this project from start to finish, right? So if we think about, in some cases, these are assets. In some cases, this is technology in general. In some cases, it might be subscriptions to internet service provider circuits. One of the other items that we're going to include, deliverables. So sometimes these can be considered like outcomes. Say I'm merging two enterprise networks into one. My deliverable will be a single functional network that was previously two separate or segregated networks. But you're describing it well enough that it's going to summarize the outcome.
Is a deliverable something that's tangible, something that you have in your hand, something that's a finished product?
So I would say typically not tangible. The deliverable it may use the term a document. It is the concept in general. It's the complete and thorough management of all of these assets. So the next item we'll talk about is roles and responsibilities. So you may not know every role and responsibility up front. You may not have named people you can put on those. You just know you need a resource to do X or Y. As long as you're allocating for that resource to be available at some point during the project, you can name them later.
Right. And that's going to be both for the resources you're going to deploy, but also does that speak to the roles and responsibilities on the client side?
Absolutely.
To make sure that certain roles are defined that are going to be success factors in the execution of the plan.
So the next thing we're going to want to define is, and notice we're going to use the term here, initial project schedule, right? And we can call this timeline. And essentially what you're doing here is you're putting some kind of loose start and end dates around it, but based on the complexity of the project, based on the client's preparedness for the transition, based on the amount of documentation available, based on the condition of the environment, all those things are going to have some impact, but that impact is only going to expand our scope by a couple of weeks. So the next thing we want to talk about is the project charter. So what a charter does is defines why. It's about summarizing the why.
And is that for the benefit of the folks on the operations side?
This is really the formalization of all of those discussions that we've had throughout the course of the project thus far, and to get them memorialized in a document that's recorded in a centralized location that everyone can reference if needed.
Do you find that there's more skin in the game for the people involved when they know the goals and objectives in the charter for the project?
So by restating all these overall goals and objectives and the scope of the project, it gives everybody that has a role in the project the opportunity to read through that and see, okay, this is what this project is for, and we are going to cover these types of things. Or on the converse side, we're not going to cover those things, right? Sometimes a project charter and the scope can be just as important to say what we are doing versus what we're not doing. If there's any gray area, then you want to use that as an opportunity, use this project charter and this initiation process as an opportunity to define that. So last piece of the project initiation component is a financial analysis, so that everybody that's involved in the project understands what it looks like from a financial perspective.
And is that analogous to what goes into the initial scope of work for the financial analysis as part of the proposal, or is this more addressing the underlying cost to execute this plan?
It could be both. In most cases, it's inclusive of the first thing, the first item, which is the proposal that was signed that started this.
Well, that's important too, to make sure that what you deliver is delivered within what you quoted.
It's consistent within here.
How soon from the time the client signs to the start and finish of this phase?
So it's 2 to 4 days either way. Because even on the complex side projects, or the projects that have some increased complexity, you have already had a lot of these discussions and outlined a lot of this that's contained inside this project plan.